Works out that if you have a little opening in a dark room looking out, through that opening, an image of the world comes in upside down on the opposite wall. It's just a given. It's been around for, well, since the beginning. It's the physics of optics. That's how all cameras work, except cameras use lenses. My first Camera Obscura images were just openings, little holes, 3/8 of an inch, which gives you a kind of a rough idea of how things look. Eventually I started using lenses because I wanted them sharper. Camera Obscura images of houses across our street was actually the first one I made. So I didn't know exactly what to feel, except that I felt like some kind of inventor, like I had discovered photography again or something. So it felt very new and thrilling. And after that, this living room picture, I made a bedroom picture. You know, it took a few days to work it out, but our bedroom was covered with black plastic, and our neighbors must have thought weird stuff about us, you know, this satanic cult living next to us or something. Lisa and I would wake up in the morning and see this upside down world with squirrels walking across the walls, and it really was in the territory of dreams. It's potent, it's very reminiscent of real magic. It took me 6 months or so to figure out how do I make an exposure. So and that's what's different about this work, that I actually made a picture inside a Camera Obscura. It felt like there was a revelation of the process, like keeping magic while showing the trick at the same time. The photographs of sunspots on a table were done in Umbria in Italy. It's covered with vines and olive trees. So what we're looking at, in fact, is a sort of Camera Obscura. In this case, it's what happens when small openings are created by the crossing of branches or leaves, making small openings. And then in the shade, which is sort of the dark space, what we're seeing is the sun actually defining itself very clearly on the table. Dapple sunlight is basically Camera Obscuras naturally. So that happens all the time. Van Gogh has a great number of paintings where it's just dapple sunlight and you can sort of see these circles. So I wanted to make pictures about this natural occurrence in two cases. I don't know why I made two, but I think it makes sense to have one being raw, just a table, and then the pleasure of eating with a tablecloth. Photography, like any other medium, can be an avenue to refreshing the world. I don't want to just repeat the same old news. I'm always trying to figure out new ways to look at stuff. And I think there's some embedded sense of hope in that. You know, if you make the world interesting, if you make a paper bag look interesting, then the world is interesting. And I think that's not always the case in art, you know, but I think for me that's one of the agendas. You know, I'm involved in the craft of something that is not always a given. But I think it's important to offer, you know, your photography god the effort. And I decided that it might be interesting to try to make pictures inside a portable Camera Obscura that allows images of the nearby landscapes to actually fall on the ground itself. It's a little off here, but not bad. I think that's okay. So what I do then is to make a picture, record a picture of that event of images landing on the ground. And that sandwich is very surreal, but it's also very natural. So this kind of thing that I do, where a landscape lands on grass, you could easily do this in Photoshop. You can just, you know, I mean, everybody's doing it. So in a way, having to work to earn a certain kind of image feels right. If it comes too easy, it might be suspect. The bridge in some way symbolizes this great art form, this useful thing, but it was made in a certain shape that is beautiful. And I think in that spirit I'm trying to work the same way. That is about being inventive, you know, not just to come here and make a quick picture of it. That's nothing, because there are a billion pictures of this bridge. I think there may be only one like the one I just made, and I think people who built this bridge probably had that in mind too. We're going to make something special. I don't always feel comfortable speaking about spiritual things, but there is something akin to that, where, you know, we're inside a darkened space and we're allowing light to do its job, and we're sort of observing quite a mystical process, you know, that no matter how abstract, you know, the ideas behind it get, eventually what you're dealing with is the ground, you know, and that is such a common thing for everyone. You are sitting on the same ground that I'm sitting on. That's a good basis to start from. That's important to me.
Exposure is spot on.
Exposure is?
Spot on.
It's beautiful.
Yeah, not bad, huh?
The Camera Obscura is the most original and oldest form of a photographic camera. If you have a dark space and you put a little hole that faces outside where there is light, that outside image will project into the dark chamber and appear upside down and reversed on the back wall. That's the original form of camera, which was used for a very long time before photochemistry was invented. And I just decided to work with that.
In 2016, LACMA invited artist Vira Luter to come to Los Angeles to photograph the museum using her Camera Obscura technique, for which she is very well known. We worked with Vera for almost a year to figure out how to build multiple large-scale cameras, including a movable camera on wheels that could be moved to different locations around the museum campus.
Well, when I'm inside my camera, I can see the projected image very clearly. Sitting inside the camera is like watching a film upside down. When people walk through my image, I see them walking through my image. When birds fly through the sky, I see the birds. When the palm trees sway in the wind, I see that. It's just that the photographic emulsion doesn't record it in an evident way. Constant movements like trees slightly moving in the wind will show that slightly out of focus quality because of the length of my exposure. Any kind of faster movement, such as people walking through the image or cars driving by on Wilshire Boulevard, will disappear. Anything that moves quickly will become invisible. So I do quite a lot of planning. I mean, weeks and months of planning before I make a photograph. Photographing from the bridge at LACMA was an obvious image to make, simply because it's an amalgam of all the different situations that exist at the museum. We can see the beautiful 60s building, we can see the surprising and disorienting 80s building, and that large, beautiful open space where people like to congregate, and that really fascinated me. When I started out with my exposure every morning, these chairs around the outdoor tables are very neatly organized and beautifully set into place, and then people come and use them. Every time a chair gets moved, they reflect the light very strongly and leave an imprint of the location in which they were sitting. I think that there's a lot of memory in these photographs, both philosophically and obviously. Obviously, we always see a time being recorded in nature or in objects. And philosophically, we can think of it by knowing that many things happened. Many people walked through this image, but didn't leave an obvious trace.
One of the most compelling works to result from the residency is a photograph of one of the museum's European painting and sculpture galleries. Vera conceived of this photograph as an idea even before she arrived on site at LACMA. She had this very rich concept of making a photograph that would be in dialogue with the iconic picture gallery scenes that we associate with 17th and 18th century paintings, where you see these grand perspectival views of gallery displays.
The image is a very long exposure of the interior of this gallery of European Old Master paintings.
To photograph the European gallery, we had to construct a camera that could operate undisturbed for a long period of time. What we ended up doing was camouflaging the camera by building it directly into the gallery. Once the newly constructed walls were painted and decorative floor molding applied to match the existing finishes of the gallery, the camera was more or less invisible to unsuspecting museum visitors.
We spent weeks and weeks and weeks composing that image, making sure this frame is here, this frame is there, I can see everything, we're not slicing through a painting. Good. Okay, let's go in, and I call you from inside. We need someone to shine a light on the top part of the frame, about just above where the angel ends. Can you move further inward towards the center of the piece? Okay. We're slicing the head of the angel in half. That's tough. I think that's bad luck.
Can we move it left like 3 inches?
Sure.
Sure. We'll move it we moved it 6 inches to the right, so I'm going to move it 3 inches back to the left, and you tell me what you think.
Yeah, wonderful.
You ready? Yeah. Okay.
Perfect. Stop there. This is fantastic. If we could keep it here, that would be fantastic. Yeah. Thank you so much, everybody. I'm so happy. Thank you, Patrice. Thank you.
Unlike the painting, where the artworks are completely identifiable, the inversion of positive and negative tones in Vira's photograph makes it impossible to identify the artworks in the gallery. So you have this push and pull between a fictional painting that imparts detailed information and Vira's photograph, a so-called truthful photograph that lends a certain mystery to the paintings within it. Vera had a vision of photographing masterworks, like our large-scale painting of A Game Market by Franz Snyders. We had to build room-size studio cameras inside the museum to enable her to make such photographs. As you can imagine, it would be impossible to work with such valuable paintings outside of the museum. Vera would never be able to bring such paintings to her studio.
I have photographed since 2012 inside museums. I had not before photographed two-dimensional works of art, and it was to some degree a real experiment for me to turn to two-dimensional works. And an experiment on my end to see what happens when this turns black and white. What do I see then that's other than the painting itself? Lucretia was chosen probably by the intuition and the realization that the dynamic of the painting would be beautifully explored in black and white and negative. And as we can see now in my photograph, the figure that is committing this tragic suicide is actually turning into a spiral that moves upwards and, if you wish, shows an ascension. So a common woman committing suicide, actually it becomes the figure of Mary ascending. So that's very interesting because that's not a coincidence, and I think we see it probably more easily through the reduction of black and white that happened in my photograph. Wanting to photograph art is sort of an important step in the whole biography and cycle of my own work, which ran through architecture, industrial sites, otherworldly objects like zeppelins. And I think it's a natural evolution to, for me, it seems natural to turn more and more inwards. And since art is what I think about all the time, I also look about other people's art. And in photographing it, it's for me a way of relearning about what other artists did and looking at their work much more explicitly.